Hi, boys and girls. It's time to read again about Adoniram Judson. All right, so we'll get started. We're on chapter 6. Adoniram struggled to wake up. He heard all over and wondered why it was so dark and why the ground was moving under him. His throat was dry and his stomach hurt with hunger. "Water, please, Mama," he said. Then he remembered his mother was thousands of miles away from him. Anne was thousands of miles away from him. All his friends were in America, and he was somewhere on the ocean in a ship that had been captured by pirates. Adoniram closed his eyes. He could picture Anne's face as she shyly said goodbye to him a few weeks before. The other 4 young men who wanted to be missionaries had also gathered with him as he boarded this boat. "Go to England," they said. "Tell them we want to go to China, like their great missionary William Carey. Tell them we need their help." Adoniram groaned in pain. Groaned is like this. I don't even know where I am or where I'm going. For days he just sat there, smelling the foul air, longing for something to eat. His eyes began to be accustomed to the dim light, and he could finally see there were other prisoners. They all looked the same, tired and sad and frightened. "I wonder what they are going to do with us," said Adoniram out loud. But no one answered him. He could not understand the loud and long conversations that were in Spanish. "What good is it that I studied Latin, Greek, and Hebrew?" he said. "At school, these languages don't do me any good." Now, everyone was seasick. That's where you get kind of sick to your stomach and throw up. The place smelled worse and worse every day. "As long as I live," Adoniram said, "this is the worst thing that could happen to me. I should cheer up and know that this is as bad as it's going to get." Adoniram asked God to help him. He pulled out his Hebrew Bible from his bag and began to read it aloud in Latin. And then he would read it aloud in Latin, translating it in his mind from Hebrew as they went along. He read in Latin for several hours. "Young man," the ship's doctor said to him in Latin, "why didn't you tell me you can speak this old tongue?" He means, why can you speak this language? Latin. Adoniram smiled. "I never thought about it. I just assumed everyone here spoke Spanish." He explained to the doctor that he was not part of the crew. "I am an American missionary on my way to London," he said. Well, I suppose a missionary will not cause any trouble for the pirates. You may come on deck. I'm sure you'll feel much better up here." "Thank you, Doctor," Adoniram replied. "I think you may have saved my life." Adoniram looked down at his Hebrew Bible. Well, I guess it was good knowing the ancient language is important. The doctor helped him crawl up the ladder. Oh, what a tremendous relief it was to stand up on the deck and feel the cold, salty air pouring over his face. Adoniram threw himself down on the deck and slept. When he woke up, he thanked God for sparing his life, especially in that terrible, filthy place. "Now I know you can take care of me anywhere I go in the world." Many days passed as Adoniram saw land. Spain looked very different than what Adoniram had seen in America. The trees were different, the houses were different, the people wore different kinds of clothes. Adoniram felt very strange. He had not been able to change his clothes in a long time. He had not been able to clean himself in a long time. He wanted to stop and clean up, but he and the ship's crew were immediately sent to Bayonne, a town in France. This is terrible, Adoniram thought. The mission board is waiting for me in London. My family and friends don't even know where I am. Anne must be worried. In France, the captives were paraded down the street. Adoniram did not know where he was being taken, but he knew he did not want to go there. So he started shouting in English. Maybe someone in the crowd would understand him. "Help me!" he shouted. "I am an American! I am not a crew member! I want to go home!" No one seemed to understand. He shouted more. He shouted anything he could think of. He started shouting who he was. "I am a missionary. I'm engaged to Anne Hasseltine. I have a brother with a funny name, El Nathan. I once was a traveling actor. When I was little, I gave my dad a handful of bugs, and I knocked over the corncob house. I learned to read when I was 3 years old," he shouted. No one listened. He began to shout how evil it was to be a pirate and how wrong it was to take people and put them in a ship. Suddenly, a man with a black cloak came up to him. "Lower your voice," he said. Adoniram was surprised. He spoke English. "I am from Philadelphia," the man said. "Go with the guards now, and I will do what I can to rescue you." Adoniram nodded, thanked the man, and continued on his way with the rest of the crew, saying nothing the rest of the way. They arrived in a large gray prison. He was led down, 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 down into a dark dungeon. There were no beds. There was a lamp that was the light was very low, dim, they call it, and it gave out such a pitiful light. Straw was spread all around, and it was even on the walls. Adoniram tried to make a little pile of straw to sit on. "I wonder what bugs have been crawling in the straw," Adoniram said. He shivered in the dampness of the place. He felt sick, breathing in foul-smelling air. He paced up and down the cell for hours, wondering what was outside and whether this man from Philadelphia had been telling the truth. What if the man had really been a friend of the pirates? If that were true, then Adoniram would be stuck in this dungeon forever. He would grow old and die here and never see Anne or his family or his friends ever again. "I will never be a missionary," he thought. "All my trouble will have been for nothing, and then I will die." He grew tired of pacing, but he did not stop. He did not want to lie down on the old, yucky straw. "If I ever get out of here, I am going straight to London, then I'm going to straight home to marry Anne. And when we go, then we will go to the East and be missionaries and forget about these prisons forever. And then what if I am here so long, Anne forgets about me and marries someone else? Oh no!" This terrible thought raced through his mind and gave him a heartache. He leaned against one of the pillars in the middle of the room. Just then, a loud screeching noise shattered the silence. It was the sound of an old rusty door being opened. Two men entered. One was the jailer, and one, who is that man? Adoniram looked closely at him. It's the man from Philadelphia. Adoniram leaned against the pillar quietly. He did not know what to do. Should I call out to him? Should I tell him I'm here? Or should I wait quietly and see what he's doing? Adoniram did nothing. He just stared at the man and silently prayed to God for rescue. The American man spoke quietly to the jailer. He spoke in English. Let me take a look around here and see if I know any of these men. The American man walked slowly around, holding up his lamp in front of people's faces. He looked at Adoniram. Adoniram gave him a smile and nodded. The man turned away from him. No, there is no one here I recognized. What? Adoniram was about ready to shout out, but just as he opened his mouth, the American man turned quickly, opened his enormous cloak, and flung it around him. I'm going to try to show you what he did. So, I don't have a black cloak, but he was wearing a cloak, and he went like this and flung it around himself and Adoniram. And it was covering Adoniram, and it was dark, so the soldiers couldn't see. And he had his cloak over Adoniram. He was about to shout out and open his mouth, but he realized that the cloak went around him. He is smuggling me out, thought Adoniram. The American man made him walk slowly, and Adoniram tried to make himself as small as he could and walked very close to the man. What if somebody notices me? He thought. Suddenly, Adoniram realized they were out of the prison and they were in the street. The American gentleman opened his cloak and let Adoniram out and said, "Run." And that's exactly what Adoniram did. He ran all the way down to the wharf where the ship was. He got on an American ship, collapsed on a cot, and breathing hard, he fell asleep. But before he fell asleep, he thanked God for taking care of him, even in the prison. I never want to be in prison again, he said, but at least I know God will protect me in bad times. Now, all I need to do is get to London to speak with the mission board. London was a great city. Adoniram was very glad the people there spoke English. He got to the London Missionary Society and said, "There are 5 of us. We have promised God we want to spend our lives preaching about Jesus Christ in foreign lands. Several pastors in America have asked me to come see you and seek your help. Will you send us to India?" The men talked and prayed. Adoniram walked back and forth in the halls. He looked into the room. The men were still talking. He walked around London, and finally there was news. "There is trouble between England and America," he said. "We might even be in a war soon. We think it's best that if American churches send their own missionaries." Adoniram turned to go. He boarded the ship with a heavy heart. He had come all this way, been captured by pirates, stashed in a dungeon, all for nothing. All the way home, he prayed, "God help us." Anne met him at the ship. Her face was bright and happy. "I'm so happy to see you," he said, "but I feel as if I have accomplished nothing. There is no one to help us. Our future is dim." Anne shook her head. "No, Adoniram. Our future is as bright as all the promises of God. You must trust him, not the mission boards, and you will get to go to India." Adoniram smiled down at the small woman by his side. "You're right," Adoniram said. "I think I shall marry you right away so you can keep giving me such good advice." So they got married. And that's the end of chapter 6. Bye.